It's March 19th, and the Diablo 4 open beta first weekend is coming to a close tomorrow. It's closed
Yeah.
though, technically. It's not an open beta. I'm not calling it
No,
that.
it's an early access beta, and they've only opened it up to pre-purchasers and connoisseurs of KFC,
So,
something like that.
so you
So
ordered a double
everyone.
down to play the game?
I
No,
ate
you
so much
didn't.
chicken.
You
Every
didn't
every
because you're
time you
still
log
breathing.
on, you gotta buy the sandwich actually.
It's so silly that that's a thing, but I think that's one reason why we're having issues. Let's just start there. The elephant in the room is that on the launch day, which was the 17th of the beta, server issues galore, queue times over like 2 hours for some people in the States, getting kicked out after 20-minute sessions. It was really, really bad.
Here's what I think. I think Blizzard doesn't realize that people still like them. I think they've embraced the fact that everyone's moved on to other games and looked at, I don't even know what, Diablo 3 player numbers or something, and kind of
Yeah,
just said, like, sure, this is only early access beta. There's not going to be that many people on. Like, let's throw one resource at it instead of plenty of resources.
sure.
I don't actually know the story,
I don't
but
either.
somehow this was rocky, like queues for day, not actual literal days, but long
It
queues
felt like
and
it.
disconnects. Ugh.
Well, and why I'm bringing it up because Twitter has been split. Okay, there are those that keep saying it's an open beta. What did you expect? It's not the real game, and there are others that are saying what I'm feeling, and that if I'm paying you $90+ to test your game, I'm not paying that to stress test servers. I'm paying it to give you feedback on systems and mechanics that you set in place because I'm a Diablo fan. And so that's why I was frustrated. I was like, sure, I'd love to play your beta if I could play it. Instead staring at an error code. So I hated it. It was pretty upsetting.
We'll see how actual release goes. I expect it will go much better
I hope.
than beta does. And even this is the first sort of open beta they've done. And so it's probably not super surprising that things were a little rocky. And
Yeah,
it did seem throughout the weekend that stuff got better. I don't know if that's because everyone got over the hype immediately, because that's what people do is freak out and then instantly move on, or if actual like fixes or
both.
resourcing
Probably
was
both.
added. Probably both. Yeah, it probably got fixed while things were coming down, and so
Well,
by Sunday afternoon it's actually a pretty decent experience getting on and
yeah,
playing.
it's fine now. We even got to play a lot last night together, which was pretty sick. We had played
So
solo,
fun.
so we've got to play a good chunk. I think you're done with the story, or just about. I am getting there. First impressions. I just want to hear. Are you happy or sad or can't tell yet?
I'm pleased. I still overall, things aren't perfect. There's obviously some new stuff. We'll see whether the game can keep me, like how well the systems hold up to actually being
To
played
end
through, and
game.
then kind of like, yeah, and then to like having an
Yeah.
in-game experience that gives you reasons to keep playing and, grinding loot and whatever else. That we'll see about. But the game itself, as sort of just an answer to like, here's our next take at a Diablo title, so far seems pretty all right.
Yeah, I agree in general. I have, obviously, we'll get into a few like caveats and a few mechanics and systems that I want to talk about. But overall, as a new Diablo entry after Diablo 3, and let's ignore Diablo Immortal, but after Diablo Immortal,
Right. I
yeah,
mean,
I like
ignore
it.
it, but there's some influence, I think, from choices they
I
made with that
know.
too,
I
at
know.
least a little bit.
Yeah.
Not all for bad, and not like the ones that they got raked over the coals for. We're not getting like microtransactions to
Yet.
death or anything yet. That's probably fair.
Yet.
But it has a little bit of that vibe.
Well, yeah, and it's very reminiscent of D2. And they were preaching this, the dev team, like I don't even know the guy's name. Who cares? You know what I'm talking about. Those three nerds. They always talk about, yeah, we love D2 and we, D3 is great too, but like we really love the things that D2 is able to pull off thematically and stylistically, and this one does feel very Diablo and
Yeah.
not cartoony at all. It's very dark. In fact, we had a quest last night that we were like, what? This guy has no skin." It was really gross. Okay, so which class did you play?
Sorceress
You could play Sork, Barb, or Rogue. Those were the
or
three
Rogue.
for the
Yep.
first beta. Next weekend, you're going to get to play Druid and Necromancer.
Now, I didn't like spend a lot of time playing with anybody that was you, but you do see other people running around in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know if I actually noticed a single person playing Rogue. I'm
dude,
sure
I
they
didn't
were
either.
there.
I just saw
But
Sorks.
those, yeah, that's like the least iconic class. Barb and Sork are very
Very
sort of
iconic.
on brand iconic for a Diablo
And
game,
you're a
so it's not
main,
surprising. Yeah, I've always played Sorceress sort of primarily in
so
that branch and title.
did it
So
feel good?
um it did different, a couple of very sort of core differences from other games that I'm sure we'll talk about, but overall felt like I had some options on how to build, um and all the things that you want to see,
Returning
you know.
skills, ball lightning,
Yeah,
chain
sort of the
lightning,
classic motifs and some callbacks
meteor.
to normal things, but then development and trying some new sort of directions with stuff. And hopefully, at least the implication of options, which is big in a
Yeah,
game like this. You don't want there to be one cookie cutter build. That's part of what Diablo 3's in-game suffered from, was sort of you do one thing or nothing else, or one sort of item set and nothing else. And so I was worried about that, but it seems like that's going to be better. So I don't know. How did you feel about playing Barbarian?
I played Barb as always. That was like my first choice in any Diablo game. Barb solo play felt a bit lackluster, I'll be honest. I was feeling underpowered. And again, this is the first act. It's the beginning of the game, so you're not going to feel like super strong. But there is a level of feeling like you're geared and a little over, you're a little stronger than the content you're fighting, right?
Your character would have done better if he'd actually worn any gear.
He was nude. Yeah.
I log into the game and Nolan's character's half naked running
That was a
around.
transmog. You can take everything off. I don't know, it looked like barbarian-ish. It looked better than the gear I was wearing. So solo play, I was like, I feel underpowered. I don't feel tanky. Like what's the deal? And I tried a few different variations of builds. It lets you respec for free. I don't know if that's how the main game is going to be up until 15 or something, and then it
I
costs
think your
money.
low level stuff maybe is free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once we got in group, that's when Barb clicked and I was doing shouts, I was buffing you. It was real. I was jumping into the middle and grabbing aggro. And then I was like, wait, this is what D2 Barb felt like. Like you played with
Yeah.
group and that's his strength with the shouts and the rally cry. So then they did a good job, I guess. And I hope I can just play solo and still get some enjoyment out of that, like when the full game comes out. But I'm liking what Barb is putting out. I didn't play any of the other characters yet. I'm going to probably next weekend. I'm going to try Necro and maybe Sork because I'm interested. But
Yeah, I'll give Druid a taste, a drive at some point. That's my
that
probably
seems like
second
something you would
interest.
do as a backup for sure.
Yeah, I like how Druid plays on a lot of these games. Not all of them, but some of them.
So the skill tree is something they were preaching when they were like building the game out, and they released some screenshots early on, which obviously are going to change as they develop. It was a literal tree, picture of a tree with branches, and they did that more or less. But I think you had mentioned when we were playing that it did feel a little linear, and we were hoping for some more variation than what we're getting.
Yeah, I said that at first, and I stand by it. Probably still would like some more of that. But the further in I got, and the more I realized sort of, I don't know, the amount of synergies that things had with each other, where if you change one or two things here on the branch, you might want to change this whole other thing and then also put on this other like passive skill, and
Yeah.
that kind of enables everything else. It seemed like there actually were a good variety of ways to play. One of the things I liked was that even within the skills themselves, there was sort of this flavor choice for I don't
Tanky,
remember exactly what it was called.
offensive,
Yeah, but like you have a
utility. Yeah,
skill and you can update that skill, but then you can also do like two variations of that
I like
skill.
that.
And
Yeah.
so some options to kind of make sure that you're synergizing with whatever else you're doing, and you know some other stuff as well. The fact that it was sort of node based around different kinds of skills, your
Hmm.
basic skills, your core skills,
Core,
your
defensive,
yeah, your conjurations, that
mobility.
felt a little Diablo 3 to me, where you
Yes.
had the sort
Yes.
of canned
Hmm.
slots that you had to fill, and then
Hmm.
each one was sort of variations of different spells within that.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. I mean, obviously the tree has to get a lot bigger for the full gameplay,
Sure.
and so there's a whole bunch of skills we won't have seen, and whether or not it holds up will be a question. But it wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad. There's also a Paragon system for end game where as you level up Paragon, like you do in Diablo 3, I'm assuming you'll get points to spend towards your stats. So your in like intelligence, your strength, um, dexterity, stuff like that. So you can further spec and build out different things. Hope that comes into play a little more, the actual stats of everything. Um, but it's a solid base, and it didn't feel bad. I was worried about a straight up like D3 style where it's just like I don't know, it's a little cookie cutter, like there's just no
Yep.
build diversity until you get into like items, which is another thing I wanted to talk about. Act 1, I kind of don't have an opinion on items yet, just to be honest. Like they're they're starter items. They're not anything to write home about except a couple of stat affixes that were surprising me. So one of them for me was a stat that gave me a skill point into one of the skills I didn't have, one of the shouts. And so I now had that skill and I could use it. I love that. And I think about how a build can come together with those unique kinds of stats instead of just the normal like, the attack speed one or bleed damage or the ones that are expected.
Yeah. Good variety. And it seems like, I mean, itemization and how you do customization to your items are very one and the same. It feels like with a lot of things, and we kind of implied the same thing talking about mechanics, but it feels like they found a real middle ground between some ARPGs that are like way overly complex or take tons and tons of knowledge or really
PoE.
sort of in-depth understanding of the systems. Yeah.
PoE.
Um, and the skill tree and everything else versus games that you want somebody to be able to just pick up and play but that don't have any of those choices
Yeah.
and it feels like there's a good middle ground here where items are tradable but then you can customize specific stats.
The
However, once you
extraction
do the
system.
customization, like items go account bound
Yeah.
for you, so the nature of like loot drops and what it means for trade changes, which is interesting. But it seems like you're going to be able to really tailor items
Hmm.
to kind of fit what you need,
Hmm.
and yet those things are going to be based on some kind of resource system, and
Yes.
consumables. So, yeah, I'm optimistic that it'll work well. There's definitely a lot of D3 influence in
There is
materials and in
materials.
everything
Yeah.
else.
I was getting that.
The whole taking this sort of unique part of the legendary item out of the legendary
I
and
like this.
decoupling it from the drop
Yes.
and allowing you to have that feature but on a sort of standard item instead is a super cool concept
Also
as
borrowed
well.
from D3 with the cube.
Yeah. Yeah, they do similar things.
But I think it's way more interesting this way because instead of just like applying it to your character, it's applying it to an item. So you can have yellow items now are hype again. Rare items are basically useless in some of the other like in D3 for the most part. But you could like really min max a sick rare item that you get using that system. So I'm excited about endgame in that regards because there's gonna be some grinding there, which is good. You want some grinding.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know that they will, and maybe you know just from having read about the game more. I'm curious if they're going to do sets at all. They went too hard into that, I think, in D3, and the
Yes,
game suffered for
I
it.
agree.
And so I'm kind of hoping they just avoid that altogether.
Me
But
too.
it still has its place, so we'll see how that
I'm
goes.
sure we'll get them. I don't know at some point. But the other unique nature of this beta and of the game itself is this an MMO? Like the you said you saw a couple players and there were world bosses. I think 2 or 3 actual events. Did you get to do one? You're smiling. I didn't get to
No,
fight it.
I had one that came up while I was logged on, and I was
Yeah.
like, I ought to go check out what that's about and go find it. And then I didn't. I like finished the dungeon I was in or something
I wish we
stupid.
would have. I bet it's
Um,
hype. I bet it's cool. But
the concept is cool.
it's very
Even
MMO and I don't love
Yeah, even some of
MMOs.
the very basic things I did, interact with an item that then was like had world effects,
Yep.
was kind of cool. It it blurs that line a little more than I expected,
Mhm.
but I think it's taking mostly good from it and not,
Yeah. I think
you
so.
know, not just like trying to abandon the sort of roots of
Mhm.
ARPG stuff. So none of it was offensive to me. A lot more item collection, a lot more sort of different skills of things that you're leveling up for your character besides just your main quest things. That feels a little MMO-y.
The
The
side quests
social
especially.
parts,
Yes.
yeah, the social parts feel a little MMO, and the like reputation with each various
Yeah.
area as a way
Yeah.
of giving you more quests and content. So there's lots of things that do, but
Maybe
that can
it'll
be
work.
good. And
Yeah.
honestly, if it means your boss fights take more coordinating and actually like
Mhm.
building specific builds and working together as a team
That's what I was going to say.
rather than just like throwing all the best items on somebody and like, you know, just running in YOLO
Yeah.
and kind of
Leroy
doing
Jenkins
it
style.
like, yeah, like D2 style where you just run in the same boss over and over again or whatever. That has a ton of potential to actually be really fun. And they've built bosses, at least initially, that seem like they're going more in that direction. Your
Yeah.
interactions, you actually have to boss, you got to dodge skills, you got to pay attention to what's going on around you,
They're hard.
and you got to work together. Yeah, and they've found a pretty, at least for the early ones, again, we've only seen this much of the game,
Mhm.
but they did a good job of, you know, giving you forecasting skills and what they're going to do so you didn't feel like stuff was cheap, but also having to react and move. And
Yeah.
I'm excited for how bosses could look. Some of
I,
the in-game bosses and like event bosses could be
yes.
so fun.
I'm very excited about bossing in this game because in PoE, bossing in the game is great. It's there, very challenging and different. It's just very hard. And in this, it's challenging but doable. And it's because of what you said with the MMO style, like red circle on the ground, don't stand here kind of gameplay and positioning. I was calling out shouts that I was giving you, like resource shouts or damage buffs, and it felt really good multiplayer. And so imagine that with 4 people or more, I
Yep.
guess, with the event boss. So I'm very excited about bossing in the full game. So
Yep, me too.
okay, finally, I want to wrap up with the overall look of it and the
Yeah, with how it
UI.
looks.
Yeah, it
It's
looks
a good thing to talk about because this game looks amazing.
it looks amazing. It looks modern, dark. Looks like
Yep.
Diablo, which is important, and it doesn't look like D3, which I'm very excited about. One thing I did want to point out, though, when talking about the graphics, the actual game itself is beautiful, but I don't know if you felt this way, but the UI feels like a mobile game slash a console game, and I'm worried. I saw a side by side. Listen, I saw a side by
Yeah.
side on Twitter of D4 and Diablo Immortal inventory, and it's literally the same. And that's fine, I guess, but I did feel like several times like this feels like it needed one more level of polish, and it doesn't quite feel like a PC game first. It feels like a console slash mobile game first, and I don't know how I feel about that.
No, I could agree. I also think they, and again, they're complex things going on, so they have to be careful. But some of just the UI as well, kind of busy. There were definitely places where I hope between now and release, not just technical stuff gets polished, because
Mm-hmm.
there's some places that I'm with you, and I agree. this was built for cross-platform, which can
Sure.
sometimes really just means PC last
Yeah,
in
that's
terms of
exactly what it
interactions.
means.
It's really what it means, and it's a little annoying. That can get on my nerves, and it had a little bit of that. It wasn't too bad, but there were some other places that I was like, "Oh, guys, just one
Yeah,
more level of refinement here would go so far." And they may be able to do some of that. Some of that may be in the works, so we'll see.
we'll see.
It also, as good as it looked, um, definitely like is a modern game. Like it's gonna use your specs,
Hmm.
and depending, you may find yourself seeing some frame drops,
Frame
seeing
drops
some
here,
performance issue.
a lot
It's
of them.
not, yeah, it's not. I mean, I'm not gonna say like the game's not optimized, and again, we're beta, so we'll see how that goes. And it does. It looks great.
Yeah,
That's a hard thing to balance. I'd like to see a little bit more sort of tightening up there, whether that's like correct recommendations of settings based on user input so that there's a little bit better performance for what you're getting or something.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but that's tricky.
the good news is this isn't the game release. This is beta, meaning
Absolutely.
that's what this is for. So like, I'm hoping they'll hear some of that feedback. You can even submit it. I might. I don't know if they actually. Yeah. Hopefully they will tighten things up. I think they will. They have a couple more months after the beta to do that. And so before we wrap up, what are your final thoughts on the time you spent with the beta?
I had so much fun.
I
I'm
did too.
sad it's ending. I hate that like just short enough that you start to get a character
Yeah,
sort of coming together and then it's like, oh
it's
well, it's done.
cruel.
So that's yeah, so that's annoying. But I knew what I was getting into and knew it was a
Yeah.
beta. It's got me hyped for the game. It won't be perfect. It's not going to please everybody. You can tell that they have tried and taken some of the best things from a few of the things that have worked
Hmm.
and are trying some new things as well that could pay off. We'll see. I'm very optimistic that this is going to be a good title. How it whether or not it has legs for like longevity is going to be sort of the big
That's
question
the
for me.
conversation
But
later. Yes.
yeah, I'm already glad that I've pre-purchased, and I can't always say that with games today, and I'm excited to play it. So overall, like I walk away as or more hyped than I was coming in, which was a pretty hard bar to reach.
Yeah, I agree. I had fun. I think that's what it comes down to. I was worried I'd boot it up and would like just not like it. And I totally like it. I think it's got a really good starting point, and I think if they tighten up a couple of things we mentioned, the game could be very excellent. And it's going to have staying power regardless. It's Diablo. I mean, D3 is still around, and I
Sure.
hate that game, but some people love it. This one, they'll need to tighten up in game. The in game is going to be a very important conversation when the full game comes out, but I am looking forward to it in June.
Yeah, can't wait to play it together when we don't lose our characters days later.
Oh, yeah, no hardcore here. Just we're playing.